Just picking up on that last point about, everybody is in favour of this. Certain people are, so I had to correct you on that yesterday, John, but a lot of people aren't in favour of this because there are too many doubts about it and lack of certainty and lack of clarity. And you mentioned about the midwives, making a statement. I thought that was actually quite extraordinary, given that 9 of the 19 hospitals in the country where presumably these midwives work, don't provide the full range of women's health care. And I just wonder why they're not campaigning for the services to be provided in their own hospitals. I would also just raise this issue about the kind of dual employment between Holles Street and Vincent's, because I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. I read recently, and you might confirm this, Dr. Boylan, that 40% of the consultants in Holles Street have a joint contract with Vincent's.
Yes.
That's
sometimes
correct, yeah.
It's for what's known as admitting privileges. So if I'm on the staff of Holles Street and I'm looking after a woman who is in Vincent's for whatever reason, then I have the right to go and see her there, and my liability exposure is protected.
Okay, thank you. So there are existing strong links with Vincent's.
There are some consultants who actually...
So it can't be regarded as totally objective. One of the earlier speakers raised the question, why will the nuns not sell the site? And I think that is the key question. Why will they not sell it? They promised that they were going to gift it. It makes sense that they would. The government say they want to purchase it. They want to own it fully. And you ask, why will they not follow through on that promise? And I think there's some indication in the lease agreement on what the reason is why they won't sell it, because section 6.4 of the lease states that the landlord, that's St Vincent's Healthcare Group, will be able to mortgage charge its freehold interest in the land without notice to the maternity hospital 20 years post-construction. They have to obtain written consent in the first 200 years. The first 20 years, I beg your pardon, the first 20 years. And of course, what's significant there is the control or the influence that will be there in the board. So it strikes me that this is essentially about land value and not so much the management of the campus. And I would just ask you, Mr. McGarr, can you estimate the additional land value which that lease and the right to mortgage or charge public property, what we're told is public property, what value that might add to the existing St Vincent's holdings?
Well, you'll be glad to hear that I won't pretend to have any real estate knowledge for South County Dublin, perhaps unfortunately for me. But what I will say is that currently this is a site with some buildings upon it. There is to be an overlap. Some of the buildings that are currently on that site will be removed. And I know the Ministry identified some of those as, for example, dermatology. There'll be offices provided for within the new building for the use of St Vincent's Healthcare Group.
But would you hazard a guess as to the increased value of the St Vincent's holdings?
I would be very careful in trying to value land that I don't know anything about. What I can tell you is that what we have is currently a piece of land, and the intention is to develop it to the value of between 500 million and 1 billion in terms of building an additional facility upon it. Then, according to the lease, the St Vincent's Healthcare Group will now have a landlord interest in not only the land that is there, but also that entire development value as well.
Okay, and of course, those of us who have been involved in this issue for many, many years will recall when St Vincent's mortgaged the public hospital in order to build a private hospital. Without any approvals, and there was quite a row about that, and there's the real danger of that happening again. I want to go back to this issue of clinically appropriate. The Minister has said just today that he has no difficulty in setting out a definition of that. it's really odd that there's no definition in all of those legal documents, even though there are pages and pages of definitions in the documents. 6 pages actually in the lease agreement of definitions. So he said he will set that out in a note to us. What weight would that document have? I know you started going into that with David Cullinan there, but he's saying that his 100% guarantee would be sufficient. Now, is that the case?
I would say that the answer I was giving to your colleague earlier on was relating to what the weight that the courts will put upon papers, including briefing papers provided for in the run-up to legislation being passed. But this, of course, will be an agreement, and it is an interpretation note by one party to the agreement. Now, that is helpful to clarify what one party thought of, but is not the same as saying that this is what the agreement is intended to mean by all parties. And if it were the case that an agreement could be made by all the parties as to what that definition should be, first of all, that would be exceedingly helpful. And secondly, it would be even more helpful if it were put into the lease. After all, if all the parties are at idem, they are all in agreement as to what that definition was, this is the place to put it, into the document.
Okay, and I put it to the Minister today, and I'd just like your opinion on this, that that's something that could be done in a matter of minutes.
If there's no disagreement, and it's been represented that everybody who is in this discussion all understands exactly the same meaning of the term clinically appropriate, that being the case, there should be no difficulty in drawing up that agreement and that definition and inserting it into the agreement.
Okay, and I think I recall Professor Higgins being on a radio programme with you just recently, where you suggested that there should be a very clear definition in all the documents, and I think he endorsed that view.
I don't think I've been on the radio with Professor Higgins, though I will confess I've been on the radio more often than I found comfortable over the last week, and so it's possible that he did so when I on a time when I wasn't there. But I will say that in the event that Professor Higgins has accepted that it would be a good idea to define it, that would mean that 2 of the 3 parties to this agreement had indicated that they were happy to have that happen. And if St Vincent's Healthcare Group were happy to have that happen, that would be all 3 parties of the agreement, and there would be no delay caused by placing that definition into the lease. Okay,
thank you. Dr. Boylan, could I just quote you there earlier? You said a golden chair could be more of a liability than an asset. Would you just explain your thinking on that?
We don't know who the Minister for Health is going to be in the future. And if you get somebody who is extremely conservative, well, then they can instruct the hospital not to do certain things as well as to do certain things. And so I think it gives, it's kind of, to me, it's kind of ridiculous, to be honest with you, that a Minister for Health who has no medical training is the person who's going to decide on the medical treatment in a maternity hospital in the case of a dispute. That, to me, is completely inappropriate.
Okay. Just my last question then. It strikes me that the idea of the government proceeding to sign off on this on Tuesday, for lots of reasons, is premature, and we've appealed to the Minister to hold off on that. But I'm aware that the business case process hasn't been complied with by the Department of Health, and we were told yesterday they're working on it. So there is no agreement that there is a robust business case for this, and that would meet the kind of bar that's set by DEPA on that. But Dr. Boylan, you also referenced earlier there that the National Maternity Hospital hasn't given its approval to this. Can you tell us just what the timescale is in that and what's involved?
The governors of the National Maternity Hospital are to vote on when all of the legal documents and the agreements with St Vincent's have been made public and given to us as governors. I'm a life governor, one of many. And at the AGM of the hospital, in response to a question from me, the deputy chair at the time assured us that we would have an opportunity to review all the papers and to vote as to whether or not we approved of what was proposed in the relationship between NMH and St Vincent's. That has not yet happened. I've written to the chair, the deputy chair today, to ask him as to when he intends to call an EGM so that we can make that decision as governors.
Okay, but there's
So
no
it
date.
requires the approval of the governors first as well.
And there's no date set for that?
There's no date, yeah, no.
As of yet, okay. Okay, so there is, from that point of view, and us urging the Minister just to hold off to allow more time for scrutiny and that, there's these other steps that need to be taken as well. So that there's no, it strikes me that there's no rush to deal with this next week or even in the next 2 weeks.
It would seem to be hasty to deal with it before all these things are sorted out.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks very much.